So the latest polling from CBS News shows Bernie Sanders with some great numbers in Iowa and in New Hampshire.
Team Rising is here to break those numbers down. Maximilian Alvarez, he's host of the Working People podcast, and Rachel Bovard, she's Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Two of literally my favorite people on this show.
Yeah,
so
don't tell
what
the
a great
others.
Monday. Yeah,
We
don't
love
tell
you
anyone
guys.
else. Sorry, guys. Well, first I have to test if they're watching Rising. But okay, so fascinating new CBS News YouGov poll. This one's the Battleground Straight Tracker, and they have actually polls of Iowa and New Hampshire, relatively high quality polls. So in Iowa, we can throw that one up on the screen first. You have a virtual three-way tie between Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg, 3.8% margin of error there. And then in New Hampshire, we can throw that one up as well. Bernie with a 27%, Joe Biden at 25%, Elizabeth Warren at 18%. Very notable, as you can see down there. The most important thing, Max, is the gain since November 2019. And Bernie is certainly surging in New Hampshire, tied in Iowa. He's probably in the best place he's ever been in this race. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think it's because people are tired, right? People, the longer this race goes on, I think the more that all the kind of, momentary hype around certain candidates or certain issues, they kind of melt away and people realize what's really at stake.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that the vast majority of people, they know what's at stake. And the thing is like you can sense just like the vitriol that the professional and pundit class has for Bernie supporters and their kind of devotion to his message, because to them, this is just another horse race, but it's not to us. Right? Look around you. Everyone knows the stakes. Australia is burning. Jakarta is drowning. The American war machine is frothing at the mouth to send more poor and working class people to die and kill other poor and working class people in other parts of the country so that war profiteers and the political establishment can make a buck and not be held accountable for their actions. Meanwhile, we are spending billions and trillions of dollars to support this war machine while working people in this country are working harder than ever and they are struggling to get by. People are dying because they can't afford health care. The stakes are very clear, and I think the longer we go, that is really, what's going to determine this race.
Very well said. And I mean, Rachel, if you look at these polls, I think we know why Sanders is doing well. When you ask people how excited they are about the candidates, his supporters are the most enthusiastic and they're the most committed. And what we've always heard from the pundit class is, okay, yeah, he's got his cult-like following, but the ceiling is really low. What we see, though, is he has often the highest favorability of any of the people like him. Outside of the pundit class, people generally really like Bernie. So the idea that his ceiling is low is kind of ridiculous. And you do see him continuing to climb steadily in these polls, especially in the early states.
Yeah, the enthusiasm gap is something I wanted to bring up because it's really evident in this poll. You know, the people who are supporting Joe Biden are like 15% committed or something like that.
15%. That's exactly right in New Hampshire.
And the Bernie supporters are like, yeah, this is our guy. Like, we're going in, we're not going to change our minds. And it really sort of breaks down into these two polls that we've talked about before, right? The people among Democrat voters who are like, we want Trump out, we don't care, we think we like Biden because we think he can win. And then sort of these die-hard, like, as you pointed out, committed to the stakes and are in for Bernie. But I think more broadly speaking, it speaks to this kind of what you were talking about, this populist rage that exists. And it's in different flavors, but it's on both the left and the right. And I think when you look at how the pundit class has treated this race, I mean, you remember the Annie Leibovitz, like, photo shoot with Beto, when all he did at that point was like lose to Ted Cruz. And you saw it with political reporters.
Interview with Oprah.
Yeah, going shopping with Kamala Harris.
Did a wicked kickflip.
Yeah, and then you had this Pete Buttigieg, like the genetically modified candidate. You know, they're all like perfect blend of like electability and whatever.
I saw a photo of him on the front page of the New York Times style section with Anna Wintour. And it was too perfect. To your point, Rachel, what I think this is again, candidates are a reflection of underlying trends within American society. And what it is about Bernie, as I highlighted this on the show last week, is that currently a majority of Americans do not believe that the economy is working for them. Even half of Republicans, lower income Republicans, do not believe the economy is working for them. That's it. That's the story of Bernie, right? That's the story of Trump.
And especially when you look at his coalition, who is it? It's young people who have been hardest hit in this economy.
Student debt.
And it's the working class. Boom. I mean, there's no mystery here, Max. He's speaking to the concerns of a group of people, and they're responding to it.
Right, and I think to Rachel's point, one of the really telling things about these polls is that Bernie supporters are the most sure of their choice, right? With a lot of the other candidates, you see a much lower rate of assurance that this is going to be their first choice. And I think that that's because, in many ways, people are still primarily fumbling for kind of the best answer to beat Trump, right? And that is really Biden's kind of message. You know, my friend Nathan Robinson writes about this beautifully, that, you know, Biden's whole pitch is that he is the most electable candidate. And this is like some sort of like bizarro political reality that the Democratic establishment refuses to extricate itself from, because Biden is electable by what metric, right? I mean, this is the thing, like with the Republicans, if you try something and you lose, you're out. And like the Democratic establishment will try to do the same when it comes to the progressive wing. If progressives lose in any way, shape, or form, you see the headlines that, you know, the progressive wave is over. Like, this proves that people don't want, you know, these progressive policies, so on and so forth. Meanwhile, the Democratic establishment is the Frankenstein party trying to like electroshock dead politics back into, you know, like relevance, even
So
though
bring off Republicans, they're really good at that. Too.
right, but like even
We have
though
our own problems,
right,
Max.
even though Hillary on this message of electability lost 2016, the Democrats blew it. This was her argument in 2008 against Obama, that she was more electable. She blew it. This was the argument for John Kerry in 2004. This centrist moderate, you know, position was the most electable option, and they blew it, right?
Yeah,
so
but
I don't know.
Russia put up some Facebook ads, so
Right.
all of that is
$100,000.
irrelevant.
Well, I guess like it really comes down to this idea that the sort of mainstream Democrat establishment, like Republican establishment, is only concerned with how are we going to win, and that's it. And I think the voters are concerned with that too, but
What are you gonna do for me?
more concerned with who are we going to be, right? Yeah, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to solve my problems? And that's, I think, this poll in a nutshell.
It's so true. And by fixating the Democratic establishment, by fixating on winning to the exclusion of all else, what have they done? They've lost. I mean, over the 8 years of the Obama presidency, 1,000 state legislative seats, governor's mansions, the House, the Senate, and then ultimately the presidency losing it to Donald Trump. So this fixation on winning has done nothing but leave them completely destroyed in most of the country.
And yet, let me be the stinker here. Joe Biden's in second place in Iowa. He's in second place
Still well
in New
positioned.
Hampshire. Let me, like Crystal said this earlier, and I think she's right. If Bernie wins, he has to win both New Hampshire and Iowa to possibly change some of the ground in South Carolina. Otherwise, Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. And this is a good place to be. I mean, if you come in second in Iowa and you come in maybe first in New Hampshire, not bad. I mean, we were predicting what on the show, a third or a fourth place finish in the last place. He's going to clean up in Super Tuesday, Rachel. This is actually counterintuitively a very good poll for Joe Biden as well.
No, it is, but I think it goes back to this point that I raised in the beginning about this populist rage in this country. The Democrat Party is doing nothing to address it. And in a little moment of geekery, it reminds me of that quote that Princess Leia says to Governor Tarkin in A New Hope. The more you tighten your grip, the more starships slip through your fingers or something like that. Is sort of exactly what's going on here, the dynamic, I think, between ignoring the Bernie supporters in favor of electability, you're tightening your grip and you're losing
all right, quick
your
thought
star
before we go,
systems.
Max.
Oh, you know what? We should actually, Bernie supporters, Max, should be
Oh.
a little grateful for Pete, because if it wasn't for Pete, Biden would probably be winning Iowa. Hate
This
to
is
say
this
it.
is the this is the only
say
this is the only time I will say I'm grateful for Pete Buttigieg.
We'll
The
end
lab
it
that
there.
created him is great for himself.
Thank you so much.
Stick with us. We got more for you right after this.